We are ready.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry the kind of weight? It was my turn till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my turn till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The only Jesus, when I met you, you called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, but you called me citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open. When you called my name, I ran out of that grave, This is Rahab.
Hi.
Rahab lived in the town of Jericho in the Promised Land. Rahab was not an Israelite, and she made bad choices. But God had a plan for Rahab, even though she was a sinner.
All right.
Now God told his people, the Israelites,
Hey, that's us.
to go into the Promised Land. So Joshua sent 2 spies to search the land around the city of Jericho. The 2 spies came to Rahab's house to stay the night. But the king of Jericho heard that there were spies in his city, so he sent orders for Rahab to bring them out. But Rahab hid the spies
Hello.
Bring him out, you hear?
and told the king's men that it was true that the men were at her house, but she did not know where they were now.
I don't know. But
She told the king's men to go quickly to find the spies, because they could not have gone far.
go now.
Oh, right.
So the king's men rushed out to the city in pursuit of the Israelite spies. All the while, the Israelites hid on Rahab's roof. So Rahab went to them and said, I know the Lord has given you this land. We have heard of the great acts that God has done for you. Your God is the God of all the heavens and the earth. So please swear to me that you will be kind to my family. The spies agreed to this, and Rahab helped them escape from the city. Before they left, they told Rahab to tie a scarlet rope to the window.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oops.
This rope would serve as a mark for Rahab's house and would remind the Israelites of their promise to her.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And so the spies were on their way. For 3 days, they hid from the king's men who were looking for them. Finally, they returned to Joshua and told them all they had seen. Rahab was remembered for her faithfulness, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies and put her trust in the one true God.
Last Sunday, Tim took us back in time, about 2,000 years before Jesus was born. And we started in the book in the Old Testament called Joshua. Tim recaptured for us a little bit who Joshua was. He was mentored by Moses. That was the guy that led Israelites out of captivity in Egypt into the Promised Land. And he was also one of the 12 spies that Moses sent out to check out the Promised Land. When the spies came back, 10 of them said, there's no way we can do this. Their cities are fortified, they're giants, and these people are so skilled. It's just we are not strong enough to conquer the land. 2 other spies, Joshua being one of them, and Caleb being the second, encouraged Moses and people, we can do this. We should do this. We're strong enough. They focused on God's promise. Well, the Israelites decided to go with the failed report by the 10 spies, and that set them off and wandering in the desert. With Joshua, we are about 40 years later right now, and we are in the camp with them by the Jordan River. They're about to cross the river, and in order for them to enter the Canaan, the Promised Land, they're going to have to make the first stop in Jericho city. Jericho is not a big city, but it is heavily fortified, and it is in a strategic location because it is just a few kilometers west of Jordan River in the Jordan Valley, and it is a sort of entry point to Canaan. Fun fact about Jericho, Geographically, it was the lowest city on earth. It was about 750 feet below sea level, which is about 230 meters below sea level. Joshua sends out 2 spies himself to scout the location. He sends them in secret because he has learned the hard way from this whole spy mission fiasco that sent the Israelites for 40 years to wander in the desert. And this time, the guys, when they come back, they're going to report only to him. See, the mission of the spies wasn't to verify whether or not to attack the Jericho city, but when and how. The fact that Joshua is sending spies here is not a sign of his lack of trust in God's promises. It is simply an evidence of his good leadership as a commander of the armies. So the 2 spies, the 2 guys, take off and arrive in Jericho and go to spend a night in the house of the prostitute Rahab. Well, this lodging location might seem a little strange to us at first, but honestly, there are very logical reasons behind it. First, her house is in the city wall. So in case of an emergency and some danger, that's a fast escape route. And secondly, 2 strange men in a house of a prostitute are not going to draw too much attention to themselves, unlike in the other parts of town. And just a side note here, Jewish historian Josephus, you've heard Tim and I refer to him before when we talk about Jewish history, called Rahab an innkeeper, and she might as well have been one. The king of Jericho found out somehow about the spies arriving in the city, and he sent his own men to Rahab's house, and he demanded that she would give them up. What comes next was very dangerous for Rahab. She has hid the 2 spies on the roof of her house. And when questioned about the strange men in her house, she sent king's men on a wild goose chase. She lied to them. This move was dangerous because according to the rule of law, the Hammurabi's code of law, this was an ancient Babylonian code of law, the set of rules established to meet the requirements of justice that they were using in Jericho, she should have been put to death. The paragraph read like this: "If scoundrels plot together in conspiratorial relationships in an innkeeper's house, and she does not seize them and bring them to the palace, that innkeeper shall be put to death." The narrative doesn't state that the spies were under any divine special care, but it is pretty strange that the king's guards were simply persuaded by her, that they simply took the woman's word and they did not search her house. See, the Bible often spares the details of God's divine guidance over human intrigue. We see that in the story of Joseph in Genesis. We see it in other stories in the 2nd book of Samuel. But the narrator here implies divine protection. So the king's men leave and take after the spies. We stay in the house and we witness an interaction between Israelites and Rahab that allows us to understand why she is considered one of the greats of faith. Rahab rushes back to the roof to see the spies before they actually get ready for the night. And she says this to them: "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the dread of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have lost heart because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you went out of Egypt, and what you have done to the 2 kings of the Amorites who are on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, to who you applied the curse. When we heard that, our hearts dissolved, and because of you there was no courage left with anyone. For the Lord your God is a God of heaven above and on the earth beneath. Now then, do swear to me by the Lord, As I have shown faithfulness to you, you and your part will show faithfulness to my family. And give me a sure sign, and save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and save us from death." Wow, what an amazing speech. Another fun fact, this is the longest uninterrupted speech made by a woman in a biblical narrative. At this point, Joshua, and obviously the people of Jericho, are getting ready and are convinced that the city will be taken by force. The inhabitants of the city and the nation of Israel are preparing for the battle. Rahab has described for the two spies here the emotional state of the city. They are horrified. The inhabitants of the land have lost their heart. Literally, they are seized by anxiety. And when she tells them why, she recounts for them the faithfulness of their God. Interestingly, the first miracle she mentions is the parting of the Red Sea. The people of Canaan have lived in fear of God, of Israel, for 40 years. And Israel wandered in the desert in fear of Canaanites. Israel's fear of Canaan has come from the lack of confidence in God. They responded to what they saw, not out of who God was and God's faithfulness to them. If only the Israelites had believed the power of God as the Canaanites did, they would have been in Canaan within weeks of leaving Egypt. In her interaction with the spies, she's not timid. She doesn't approach the situation as a victim of her circumstances. Rahab demands the spies to make a promise. "Make an oath, swear to me by the Lord, that they will show her and her family the same faithfulness as she showed them, and spare her, her family, and families of her brothers and sisters. She's making sure her clan is saved." And that is a thought pattern that is typical for her culture, for her environment, and for the times she lives in. And again, everyone is preparing for the Battle of Jericho, and she wants to know that her family will be spared during the attack. The men responded with a very strong assurance: "Our lives for your life." However, this oath came with 3 conditions. First, her house must be known to the Israelites. So we read in verse 18, "When we entered the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down." Number 2, all her family must be in her house. We continue reading, "You have brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house." And 3, and the mission of the spies must be kept secret. We read in verse 14, "If you don't tell what we're doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us this land." And we continue in verse 20, "But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." I love the simplicity of her response here. Agreed. Let it be as you say. And what she does next resonates with me personally a lot. She lets the guys down through her window, and immediately she ties up the red cord to her window. See, before she made the deal with the spies, she gave them an advice to hide for 3 days before they return to their camp from the king's men. So she knows the Israelites are not going to be back like the next day. But maybe she simply wants to make sure that she will not forget to have that sign in her window. Well, that would be my line of thinking, knowing how easily I get distracted. We do need to be careful in making connections between events in the Old Testament that foreshadow Christ. But many scholars, from the early church fathers on, have seen picture of Christ in this scene. The red cord in her window is a symbol for the Israelites to save the house. It was also a reminder for them of their own salvation in Egypt, when the blood of lamb marked the doors of their own homes, saving them from the angel of death on the night where every firstborn son in Egypt died. They were saved by the strip of blood on their doors. Now Rahab and her family was to be secured by the cord in her window. The blood of the Passover lamb had been a foreshadow of the Good Friday events when Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed, as Paul writes in the first letter of Corinthians. See, Rahab had a lot going against her. She was a Canaanite, she was a prostitute, she was a woman. So in the ancient Near East, she was more considered a commodity that you buy and sell than a person. Rahab did not allow the culture and the fear of people around her to define her and who she was and what she could or could not do. Throughout the whole story, we can see Rahab's boldness. She takes risks. She took risk with the king's guards when she lied about the spies being in her house. And she takes risks with the spies. She declares that the Lord, your God, is God in heaven above and here on earth. And even though she barely knows this God, she's willing to risk everything. This risk she takes, this seemingly small statement of faith, makes writer of Hebrews, the letter in the New Testament, include her in the famous chapter 11, the Hall of Fame of Faith. The chapter written to show believers how to live by faith, by giving examples of men and women with bold faith from history. And just to name a few from the list. By faith, Abraham left his people and went out to establish a new nation where God led him. By faith, Sarah was able to conceive children in her old age, whose descendants were as numerous as the stars. By faith, Moses identified with the Hebrew people and led them out of Egypt. By faith, Rahab risked her life to accommodate the Hebrew spies seeking to overthrow the city. She didn't understand what the God of the universe was really all about. But she knew he was all-powerful, and she trusted he was faithful. And she just went with that. Most likely, she was afraid for her life and for the life of her family. But she didn't give in to all-present fear. She acted in spite of her fear, and that's courage. Without hesitation, she asked the spies to spare her life and the lives of her family when Israelites conquered the city. She didn't have a clue what this is going to look like for her future or for the future of her family. Just to fast forward a little, when Jericho is captured, Joshua does this. Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her." So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. What could have been the end of Rahab turned into the new beginning, because she chose to believe God she didn't fully understand and act on her faith. She recognized something that not even all Israelites did. The God of Israel, the God is not ordinary God. She didn't let the fear determine her actions. The single act of faith, the risk she took in the name of the Lord, of heaven above and here on earth, in the name of God she didn't know and she didn't even understand, caused a ripple effect in her life. She married one of the Israelites. She became a mother of Boaz, the mother-in-law of Ruth, and the great-great-great-great-grandmother of King David. She's one of the 5 women mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. She never knew what that one act of courage would change in her life. Well, let me ask you this. Where do you need to take a risk? Where do you need to act on your faith? Maybe without even fully understanding God of the universe, but simply stepping out in faith. Is it maybe reviewing some of the friendships you have, evaluating who are you hanging out with? Who are your friends on social media? Maybe it is going back to school. Maybe it is actually starting and transitioning into a new career. Maybe it is going back to therapy or starting a therapy. Maybe it is stopping some bad habits in your life. See, you and I will never know what kind of impact in this world we can have if we show up, take risks, and declare that God is God of heaven above and here on earth. Have a wonderful Sunday.
You called me out of darkness. You silenced every lie, and no other voice would define me. I belong to you. I belong to you. You called me out of darkness. You silenced every lie, and no other voice will define. I belong to you. I belong to you. The enemy can't take what I have, change who I am. I belong to you. You know the enemy can't take what I have, change who I am. I belong to you. By your blood I've been adopted. I've taken on your name, and I need to be reminded. I belong to you. I belong to you. You know the enemy can't take what I have, change who I am. I belong to you. You know the enemy can't take what I have, change who I am. I belong to you. Greater are you who's in me than he who's in the world. The words you have spoken